Welcome to the Entrepreneurial CEO Podcast, where we dive into the real stories behind building and scaling a business. Each episode, we sit down with CEOs, founders, and leaders to uncover hard-won lessons in leadership, systems, and team building. Listen in each week to learn directly from real business leaders who have been in your shoes, had success, made the mistakes, and all of the messiness that comes with building a business. If you're ready to learn from real-world leaders and gain insights you can apply today, you're in the right place. So let's get started. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Rick, thanks so much for being here, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Everybody, today on the show, we've got Rick Gutenmann, who's been on before. And today we're going to talk specifically about the Goettl transformation, the 1,000-day plan. We talked to Ken Goodrich about this recently, and we're going to be talking to a few more folks in the coming weeks about this. So Rick was there during this time. We're going to dive into it and ask him a lot of questions and learn more about it because it's so interesting. So Rick, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let's dig in.
All right, so
I'll tell you.
First question. So you were inside Goettl during this transformative chapter of growth, when we're growing like a weed. What was the atmosphere like during the 1,000-day plan?
Yeah, so I came in midstream during the 1,000-day plan. I was actually, my role was a part of that 1,000-day plan, which was to create, training and development program within the business, an in-house training program. And so I came in, and I'll tell you, sat down with Ken Goodrich. We came to agreement that I would come, work at Goettl. And he said, "Hey, we're having our first Vital Factor team meeting in 2 days. I'd like you to be in that meeting." And I said, "Sure." So I showed up to this meeting, hadn't yet gotten an offer letter, wasn't officially an employee yet, but I sat in the meeting and ended up walking out of this meeting with 2 goals. I mean, that's how serious we were about, we got to move, right? We got to move fast. We can't wait. And there was already this, "Hey, you're on the team now. Let's get some contribution. What are you going to do?" And so I had to set 2 goals before I left that meeting. So yeah, I hit the ground running.
They were not messing around. I love that.
Not messing around, no.
So one of your biggest contributions there, I'm sure among many, was creating the Goettl Academy.
Yes.
What was the vision there? What was that like? How did it evolve? And how did you really integrate that into the Goettl culture?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we knew we were going to grow. We knew, we had a pretty aggressive growth plan and that we were going to scale. And, a big part of that obviously is as you grow, as you expand, you're going to have technicians, you're going to have plumbers. And there was just a limited supply there. We were, in order to achieve that growth, we were either going to have to poach from competitors or start creating our own. And so that was the concept, was let's create a pathway, a pipeline where we're teaching, training, inviting, young men and women to come into the trades, and then we would teach them, the Goettl way to be able to do that. So that was a big part of the plan. But there were some other benefits to it as well. Again, we wanted to make sure that at each location we were following the same policies, the same procedures, and so we needed some consistency there. So consistency as well as quality. And so we kind of had this vision that if you were a technician and we were going to transfer you from one branch to another, that you'd show up and it wouldn't look foreign, that it would be the same processes, the same everything. So, that was really kind of the vision of the Goettl Academy.
That's really, so it was more than just, it sounds like it was more than just the technical skills. It was about your systems, your process, everything that it meant to be an employee at Goettl, and a big part of it was vital factors and vital factor goals and all of that stuff.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And just rolling that out, throughout the organization.
How did you go about connecting MAP systems like accountability and vital factors and structured meetings with those training programs that you rolled out?
It wasn't so much with the technicians and the plumbers themselves. I don't know that because this is more of, management leadership process that we had with MAP. But I'll tell you what I did was, these managers were the ones that were obviously supervising and leading the technicians. And one thing that I brought in as we worked our way up through the organization, so we did training for plumbers and technicians, but then we started rolling out training for, management, from field supervisor all the way up to general manager. in conjunction with MAP, right? So MAP has the workshops. So we did leadership training that way, but there was some company specific things that we would teach in-house. And, one of the things that we did was we ran Vital Factor team meetings at each branch. But what we weren't doing that we started doing is we realized, you've got install managers at each location. You've got, HVAC install managers, HVAC service managers, plumbing install managers, plumbing service managers. So you've got, when we started, there were 6 locations when I started working at Goettl. And, so we had 6 people in the same role. So we brought them together and ran kind of a modified Vital Factor team meeting with them so that they could share best practices, so that they could look at vital factors and, work out some of the problems that were happening, throughout the organization. But rather than trying to solve that with people that may not have as much insight into your area of responsibility, we put them all together in a room.
Oh, I like that. Little mini peer groups.
That's right. Exactly.
I like that a lot. Well, talk to me about, I think it's one thing to define a process or a system or use MAP. It's another thing to get buy-in where people actually are, really adopting it and integrating it and then sharing it. How did you go about getting buy-in from the team?
It was some of the things I just mentioned already. So, how do you get buy-in from this process? It starts with, I think, seeing the growth. And, a lot of times businesses grow and the top line growth, the revenue growth is big, but the structure to support that growth is not there. And so, what we realized we needed was to have that structure to be able to manage that growth, whether that be through planning, through, developing the organizational chart, solving problems. You don't know what you don't really know what's going to happen down the road. We wish we knew what was going to happen in 6 months or 12 months. And so we just had to kind of plan for those unknowns. And again, and using this system to be analytical and to, really dissect the business and to grow it that way. One of the things that we talked about was that the problems that we have today are going to continue to be problems as we grow unless we solve them. In fact, they'll get bigger, right? So as the business scales, the problems scale with the business. Mm-hmm. So we just knew that if we didn't identify these problems, these issues, and solve them today, we're just going to have bigger problems down the road.
I like that. I think I was reading something recently about not procrastinating. If you identify something, just jump on it. Don't just sit on it, procrastinate, wait. It's not going to go away. It's not going to solve itself.
Not exactly. It's not going away and it's not going to solve itself. Correct.
Yeah. From your perspective, inside Goettl, how did MAP influence the leadership team's ability to execute and grow on the, you guys are growing at such a rapid pace, and then keep alignment throughout the company, different locations, different teams?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's the consistency. So not just the monthly meetings, but also the fact that everybody's doing these meetings throughout the organization, right? So we're speaking the same language. We're aligned to the one strategic. So the 1,000-day plan, what was great about that is that was shared throughout the organization. So everybody had a part in that. And so when we came together as a leadership team, it was to look at that 1,000-day plan and to say, where are we on this plan? So, building that accountability. 1, it was transparent. 2, obviously we set goals. Each department, each branch had a set of goals. And then there was that complete transparency where when we showed up, when we got together and when we met, we were going to pull this plan out and we were going to look at our vital factors and we were going to, check the progress against it. And so there was that was always front and center. How are we doing on our 1,000-day plan? Where are we on this plan? And so, utilizing MAP and having that regular cadence and having a consultant that came in and kind of facilitated that process for us, keeping us honest, keeping us on track, was huge.
And was that part of your monthly Vital Factor team meetings where you were reviewing the goals of the 1,000-day plan?
Yes. Yep.
That's awesome. Can you think of any moment during this time, during the 1,000-day plan, when you just noticed a big change because of the Goettl Academy or the system that you put in place, where things just started to click, and maybe there was change in how the team was operating or accountability or anything like that?
I went to the map workshop and came back, and of course had a set of goals, professional development goals. Was getting comfortable with the map process. I remember I had just rolled out a program and it was struggling, and I went to lunch with three of my coworkers and started to describe this problem. And I remember one of them said, "Well, why don't we do a little team consult and help you solve this problem?" And I had just been introduced to that process in the workshop, maybe like 60 days before. And so I was like, oh, wow, why didn't I think of that? And so taking that process, we went around the table. I was literally using a napkin to write down some of the solutions, but we worked together. And these were people that were outside of my department that just had different perspectives. And here they were willing to like lean in, help me solve this problem, providing solutions. It was great.
I love the team consult. I think it's such a powerful tool, to just simple yet powerful tool that teams love, right? Everybody wants to share their opinion, share their ideas, and then see it put into action. It's such a good tool.
Yeah.
At a company like Goettl, you've got, I imagine, all sorts of different types of people in terms of their skills, right? You've got technicians, you've got people that are in the trades, and you also have managers and, I don't know. So were there any challenges with getting the map system and process implemented throughout the different ranks of the organization?
Hi, if you're a CEO out there who's struggling with focus for your company, aligning your team, accountability, if you're struggling with execution, connecting the dots from where you're at to where you want to be, we've got a great program for you here at MAP. My name is Michael Cato. I'm the CEO. Most importantly, I was a client for 15 years, sold my company to a public company, and then bought MAP so that we can help other entrepreneurs with this specific problem. We're a 60-year-old company. We've worked with 170,000 individual executives and CEOs. We've worked with 15,000 organizations. This is what we do. Click the link below to learn a little bit more about how people just like you, CEOs, have transformed their business and ultimately transformed their life by running through the MAP system.
When I joined, Goettl was already utilizing MAP. And so a lot of those systems were in place and so forth. What I saw was we had a leadership vital factor team meeting. And what we realized was that underneath that, like I had a department that wasn't currently holding, vital factor team meetings. And so one of the challenges was for each department to roll out a vital factor team meeting, get your team onboarded, start using the MAP app, setting goals and so forth. And so I think, we inherently believed each branch should be running vital factor team meetings, but we weren't doing a good enough job, within our, we called it shared support. And so we started splitting off and having vital factor team meetings within each of those departments. And so, that was, as we scaled, as we grew, that was an area that we felt like we could expand MAP's footprint within the business.
That's really the power. When everybody starts to, it's not just the leadership executive team, it's when everybody underneath starts using it. That's when it really is powerful.
Yeah. So you get those second tier, those third tier teams, vital factor teams that are all pointing up to that, leadership team.
Yeah. How did Goettl Academy, how did you approach building out, not just the technical skills, but also leadership capacity or management? And did it have an impact on retention of the team? How did the team respond to the academy?
Really good question, because that actually was one of my vital factors was, employee retention, staff retention. I believed that, well-trained staff that are reporting to, management that are skilled would have an impact on the retention. And it's a, multifaceted problem to try to solve, for sure. So yes, we did skills training, but we also provided a career path. And that was something that Ken and I established pretty early on that we wanted to do, was that you're not coming here just for a job, you're coming here for a career. And so rather than just say, hey, you're an installer or you're a plumber, it was, here's a 4-tiered structure, beginning with, frontline, entry level, plumbing skills, with a second tier, a third tier, a fourth tier, giving everybody an opportunity then to see that on paper, how they can progress through the company, at each level, different skills, but also, different experience levels required, as well as, some pay that's commensurate with those levels. And so, just a highly structured process where they can advance through the system. And it didn't just end at like top line, like level 4 technician, because then we moved into field supervisor, install manager, service manager, all the way up to general manager. So, we created this career path where they could come in and they could actually see where they could go on that journey.
Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to know.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of retention is employees knowing that, one, that the company is investing in them, but also that there's a future, that there's an opportunity to move up through the system, and that you're going to support me along that journey.
I imagine that's super important because it's competitive in HVAC and home service, and I know there's a lack of talented people, right? And finding good people is hard, and so building out a culture that invests into your team is something that could, I suppose, help you stand out. When you think about the 1,000-day plan was ultimately wildly successful and had a great outcome. When you think about the 1,000-day plan, what role did accountability play, or how did accountability play a role? Can you think of anything specific or tangible?
Yeah, when you come to a meeting, you've set your goals at the previous meeting. You got your vital factors that are all agreed upon. They've set together as a team, and you show up knowing that you're going to face your peers, your colleagues, and your supervisor, right? Nobody wants to show up in that situation and not have achieved their goals, not have hit their numbers. And so, in terms of accountability, we knew these meetings were calendared throughout the year, so we knew exactly when they were occurring and what was expected. And, just the, accountability, really, I felt like that was the more powerful piece of it, not facing your supervisor or facing, our MAP consultant. It was facing one another, facing the team, and not having hit your numbers, not having hit your goals.
That is powerful. And do you recall working with Steve Behunin, the MAP senior consultant, during that time?
Yes.
Maybe talk about the power or the impact that Steve and the MAP senior consultant had.
Yeah, Steve kept everything. He's, was super organized, kept everything on track. Excellent facilitator for the meetings. Sometimes you can get into these little rabbit hole conversations and you can get off track and go on tangents and so forth. And Steve did a really good job of, really keeping the conversation focused and on track, as well as, keeping the MAP process pure, so reminding us. So we'd all been through the workshop. We got the training in the workshop. Steve was a workshop facilitator as well. And so he knew that process really well, and just, kept us honest with the MAP system, something that we would have potentially gotten away from if we were doing it ourselves. And so it was just nice having that person that was, well-versed in the process and, providing the structure and the consistency.
And, you had Goettl Academy at that time. Were you still sending people to the workshop?
Are you talking about the managers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Were people from Goettl still going to the workshop? Were you still doing those trainings?
Absolutely. Yeah. That was a requirement. Everybody in the leadership role went to the workshop. What I provided in terms of training through the Goettl Academy was the Goettl specific stuff, the stuff that MAP doesn't train because, MAP wasn't a Goettl specific program. So, as we had our own, company specific policies, standard operating procedures, just the way we did things, that's the stuff that I trained in the academy. So we did do let's call it like a supplemental training. So we did a supplemental training for the, service manager level, ops manager level, as well as GM level.
I think there's likely a lot of entrepreneurs and business leaders who look at what Goettl accomplished and the successful exit they had and probably aspire to reach that level. If somebody's listening to this and wants to know how Goettl pulled it off, what's the number one thing you tell them? What was the number one thing that made a difference?
I think if you're going to try to grow, you're going to try to scale your business to the level that we did, you've got to have some proven processes in place. You've got to have some structure within the business. Otherwise, we're all busy. Everybody can be busy, right? But it's like, what are you working on? Are you working on the things that truly matter, the things that are, really driving the business forward. Those, we talk about the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, the things that really make a difference, those high impact activities. All of that begins with what's our vision? What's our mission? All right. What are our core values? And it trickles down into strategic objectives. We call that the 1,000-day plan for us. And as long as you have a system in place and you have a commitment to that system, I think you can make this work. Now, MAP provided us with an amazing system where we had not just training for our leaders, but this process where we would we would set goals against vital factors and then visit those on a monthly cadence, and and then obviously hit those numbers, right? Achieve those goals and see that process, see that progress within the business. So anybody that's looking to do what Goettl did, it would be what does the system look like? What does the process look like? And then having a commitment to that, right? With a real direct path to get to those goals, whatever that may be for your business.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's pairing, I think you hit it. It's pairing that proven system with the discipline to stick to it over and over again, even though it might be boring, right?
Yeah.
But the consistently and being disciplined.
When we saw that, so, anytime you have a system like that, right? So there's some people that might say like, was this, like, why are we doing this? But when you start to see the wins, when you start to see some achievement come across the board and you start to see the wins and you're sitting in a room and you're working on your part of the business, but you see everybody else within the business and you see what they're working on and you see their wins coupled with your wins, and that's what creates the belief, right? It's the success that you get from it. And when that becomes visible, tangible, in the beginning it's hard, right? Because you're just starting a process and maybe the outcome doesn't match the effort that's being put into it. Mm-hmm. When you can start to see the output match the effort and actually the output even exceed the effort, that's when things get really exciting, and that's when you realize like, hey, we're onto something good here. This is going to work, right? And
momentum's a powerful thing.
Oh, huge. And so once we got that, I don't think there was any doubt that we were going to hit the 1,000-day plan.
Wow. Were there any hiccups? Or, I mean, at that time, you guys are growing so fast. And I think we asked Ken this question, but, from your perspective, any speed bumps, hiccups as you guys are doing that? Or were you guys just hitting?
Of course. As I said, you can't even imagine the things that you're going to need to know down the road. And so, unless you've been down that path before, how do you know what kind of challenges you're going to face? We went through things like COVID, during this 1,000-day plan. That wasn't part of the original plan. We didn't know that was going to happen, right? But we had to move fast. We had to come up with a strategy how we were going to, absorb that challenge. And so, lots of hiccups along the way, because as you grow, new things open up to you, whether it's new problems or new opportunities. And so you have to, constantly be nimble and, be willing to go back to your, in this case, 1,000-day plan and maybe make some revisions, whether that be through the org chart, whether that be through some financial goals, whether that be through some strategic objectives. But you have to be flexible to be able to do that with still keeping mind toward the ultimate goal.
Mm. Well, this is great, man. Anything else to share with us about the 1,000-day plan before we wrap?
It was an amazing process. It was not easy. It was definitely hard. We challenged ourselves. I know Ken challenged us. Steve Behanan, you mentioned earlier, he challenged us. It was difficult. I think probably in the beginning, I wasn't part of the very beginning of the 1,000-day plan, but, talking to some of my coworkers, there was a lot of disbelief as to whether or not we'd actually be able to achieve as much as we did in that time frame. And I'll tell you, when you do stick to a plan and you hit that target, and we hit the target. I mean, the exact target that was laid out at the beginning is what we achieved at the end. That's pretty cool. I think everybody felt like, could we have done this without this process? Could we have done this without without that big goal in front of us and that constant, revisiting of the goal and checking our progress and stuff? Thinking back on that level of disbelief and then to see the achievement is a pretty amazing thing. And it makes you wonder, like, well, what could we do in the next 1,000 days? Like, what kind of amazing things can we achieve in that next 1,000 days? And so, yeah, we had a huge celebration after the 1,000-day plan hit. And, we were all, super proud. In fact, I don't know if Ken told you this in his interview, but everybody got this brass polished M, this heavy polished brass M, the letter M. And some people were wondering, well, what's the M for? Is it for money? Like, what is it? And it was the Roman numeral for 1,000.
I love that.
And so this was like a little trophy that everybody got, and they got to put it on their desk, and it was like, hey, we did it, right?
That's really cool. That's really cool. The culmination of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Rick, thank you. We really appreciate you walking us through it. Really interesting to get your perspective, especially as the creator of the Goettl Academy. Thank you so much for your time, and we appreciate it. And hopefully we'll have you on again soon.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Thanks, David.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.